You know, I don't actually know what it is. Not really. I've studied a lot of history and I've studied a lot of war in my life, and for whatever reason, the Great War always hits me just a little bit harder than everything else does. I don't know how to explain it. I imagine that's true for a lot of people. There's probably just one thing that you study, that you learn, or that you're interested in that just kind of, it just hits the right frequency, you know, to match you. You know what I mean? I know this is true for some other people because I know a few other people's things. You know, I know a friend of mine whose thing is the American Civil War, for example. I know another friend of mine whose thing is specifically the Chinese-Japanese conflict that was going prior to and during World War II, etc., etc. It's just a thing. I don't know how to describe it. So this got to me. And ironically, because of the nature and content of it, I can't talk a lot about it because there's not much to talk about. Not without just doing a video on the Great War, and I don't have all week. It's nice to have some honest-to-goodness gameplay. This game has the most and best gameplay of all 5 games we've covered this week. No joke. I'm not memeing or anything by that. It's a weird combo of point-and-click adventure, but also a puzzle platformer. It kind of blurs the lines between the two. Because, you know, you have to get this item to interact with this, and that gets you access to this, and there's a little bit of a logic chain you have to follow. But there's also actual platforming and jumping, and you have to make it under this, and dig under this thing, and make sure you don't hit this explosive, or else that'll kill you all. And you have to actually very carefully throw the thing, to make sure it hits the lever to knock over the thing, etc., etc. It's overall a puzzle platformer, and I categorize it as such, but it's got actual gameplay. It was nice. It was even decent gameplay. It's not the best I've ever seen, but it was fun. It's actually got boss fights and everything. It also takes moments to do something very, very right. There's a section where we see Anna, who's awesome, who is, we do a puzzle section, you know, point-and-click adventure section, where we have to go get a car running. We get the car running to drive some French soldiers to the front. Cool. And as we're driving, we have classical music playing. I think it was the Bumblebee in this case. Or the Flight of the Bumblebee. As we're just kind of trying to dodge other cars and explosives and barrels and all sorts of other stuff on the road in a straight up arcadey action sequence. Gameplay. Woo! Then we arrive at the front and everyone's dead and we have to barely keep the survivors alive. Now, that's kind of one of the things this game does best. It's something that I very, very rarely see a game do properly. It is atmospheric and tone pacing. To explain what I mean by that a little bit, like Modern Warfare 1 did this, Plague Tale Innocence did this. I call it the puppy method, and that's named after a dude who used to do that. The general concept is you have a serious, topic, a heavy topic, maybe it's suicide, maybe it's something uncomfortable like war or death or horror or whatever. Then you have a puppy, and you just take a few moments, scratch the puppy, say hi. You give the person who's viewing or participating or playing a few moments to just kind of digest and process, which is funny because we just kind of talked about something like this over in the Soma thing. But, right, you give the brain, you give the person a few moments to recover from the horror, and then you move on. Because if you don't, it just becomes noise, like happened back in Franbeau. If it's just non-stop, horrific, nightmarish death doom, after a while it just becomes noise. Instead, and so forth and so on. You just kind of have that nice little flow through it. It's really well done. This feels like a passion project. I wasn't able to get a huge amount of behind-the-scenes info on this game. It was actually made quite a while ago, back when apparently Ubisoft gave something of a damn, done in conjunction with and the support of the French Commemoration Society, and in honor of the 100th, it's a weird word to say, in remembrance of the 100th anniversary of the Great War. In fact, it was released just before the 100th anniversary to the day of the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. And that's this game in a nutshell. I could stop the video right now because I've conveyed everything there really is to convey. The game isn't afraid to be a video game. And that's good. It keeps the player playing. It keeps them invested. It keeps them engaged, rather than just watching a show. It has video gaming moments. There's a boss battle where we throw some dynamite down into a tank that's trying to kill our friends, for God's sakes. There's a moment where there's a giant French mecha chasing us down the streets of Paris. It's actually not Paris, but it's whatever. As they're trying to run us over, you know. But it's also not afraid to be exactly what it's trying to be. You can tell this is built for people who know about the Great War because of the way it's constructed. There's several moments where we're following the events of the heroes, and then we find out that they're going to a little-known place called Verdun. Or Verdun. I'm not going to pronounce anything correctly here. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. Even the game was pronouncing things kind of differently than what I usually hear, so it's just like, it's whatever. Whatever. Doing the best I can here. You can tell that it simultaneously doesn't want to hold back and yet does so perfectly. This game, I'm going to start using this as an example. Something I tend to hear often is, Batlar! I don't know how the Grand Nagus keeps getting in my office. Batlar! How can you possibly have any kind of impact if you don't show all the viscera and gore and guts? And this game is my answer to that now. This game is not a violent, gory game. It's not a horror game. And yet, it portrays horror better than every other horror game I've played in the last year. Or more. It absolutely gets across everything it needs to, without ever going too far. There are sequences where you have to rescue people who are caught up in barbed wire. Please picture that for a moment. Being caught in barbed wire. All the little cuts, all the little nicks, bits of it sticking into your skin and ripping chunks of your flesh out as you're ripped free from it. That would be horrific. They don't show that. They don't need to. And that's my point. The game shows us everything it needs to with a stylistic representation. We pull the person free. They're barely surviving, coughing, desperately in need of aid, need to be bandaged up because they're bleeding everywhere, right? We don't need to see any of that. There's a section where they actually, chop off someone's arm. They don't show that either. We do it, but it's just behind him, so we don't have to see it. And that's kind of my point. This is a game I would consider, not with certainty, being acceptable for my niece to play. Because it never does anything truly graphic, truly grotesque, or truly horrific, but at no point in time does it shy away from its actual subject material. It's a very tight balance to maintain, and it does it beautifully. One of the last stages, arguably the last stage of the game, has us doing a suicidal charge during Neville's offensive in 1917, I think it was. And we're charging through that, and we literally, it's still a game, we have to take cover periodically and then move, then take cover and then move. And our source of cover is giant piles of our comrades' bodies. It does exactly what it needs to. And there's even little subtle touches. In the early parts of the war, it's not exactly pleasant, but the lighting is different. The way that they showcase the enemy faces is different. There's scenes of them interacting with each other and just being kind of normal people. In that final stage that I was just mentioning, it's very dark. There's a lot of red highlighting in the background. You can just barely see those piles of corpses in the foreground. Oh, and by the way, all the German troops attacking are nothing but black silhouettes, occasionally lit up by the machine gun fire. That's it. It is literally dehumanized as it's presented. And this is in addition to the fact that the whole story does exactly what it should. This is the story of a few individuals, and Horatio, the amazing dog, I don't care what you say, his name's Horatio, the amazing dog, who's a really good boy and is getting all the sausages after this. He's getting on the evacuation ship. I'm just saying, we're getting that boy out of here. But it's just a personal story. This is actually a character piece. This is a slice of the life. It's just, it happens to be happening during the Great War. The very beginning, the literally one of the first scenes summarizes everything this game needs to say in one quick scene. There's a family. The father, who is German, is deported and taken away from his wife and child. He is sent to the German lines because he is conscripted into the German army, just like his father, father-in-law, her father, is now conscripted in the French lines. There you go. Great War. Boom. And I don't know what else to add to that. I will openly admit to weeping several times on camera. I don't think anybody noticed, because it's a 16 by 9 game, which I know is a weird thing to point out. But in 16 by 9, the format I have to use for the stream means the game takes up this, then here's the chat, and here's the thing. So I'm this tiny little window in the corner, so I don't think anybody actually noticed, but by God, I was bawling. I had to stop talking at several points because I couldn't keep my tone static, because it was exactly what it needed to be. It was a reminder, and I guess that's all I have to add to that, really. I myself have said many times that the Great War is the seminal war of our history, of our modern history, excuse me. And in the years since, as I've grown a little bit older and figured out how little I know about everything, I think I am going to reiterate that opinion. If you have not played this game, I highly recommend going and playing this game.